again. It's been a while. So I don't know if you've ever had a month like I have where you just have a lot going on. So I'm moving, and sometimes that takes like a whole month. I think I've been gone for 2 months though. I don't know. I'm moving. That's why there are some packing boxes. Why I'm moving things into a priority mail box. That's because it's the best kind of box for books. You can fit like 8 books, sometimes more if they are the right size in that. And but it wasn't intentional. I just had like so many stacks of priority mail boxes because I ordered the wrong kind for my Poshmark. So that's it. And I'm taking a class now. I am trying to get a PhD in philosophy. My PhD is in religious studies, if you don't know. So I'd like to get another one this time in another PhD, this time in philosophy. It's just my passion. I am really interested in juxtaposing spirituality with philosophy. For instance, if like you look at Wittgenstein's private notebooks, which just came out, I think, within the last year or so, he sort of has this almost like extensive dark night of the soul, and he really seeks a lot of, I think, wisdom and comfort and purpose in some kind of version of Christianity. And he has somewhat spiritual language even in the Tractatus. So I don't know. So that's like an example of what I would like to write and publish on in that realm. And so right, so I'm taking a class. It's called Theories of Knowledge. The theme is kind of the post-truth era. Like we started out reading, in the modern era, Kant's What is Enlightenment, and then some of Nietzsche, and then we moved to the analytic philosophers, A.J. Ayer, and we read, what was it called? Perspectival Realism by this Italian woman philosopher, Massimi. I think her name is Michela Massimi. And now we're moving on to the postmodern era, and we're going to read Jacques Derrida. We just finished talking about this simulacra book, and then I want to finish that because, when you are a college student in a class, you are not reading, usually, sometimes you do, entire books, right? You read chapters of books. And so then I want to finish the book. And so we're going to talk about Lyotard soon, and also Saussure. So we don't have to buy any of the books, but of course I am buying all the books, which is very expensive. Because some books, especially if they're by contemporary philosophers and they just come out, they could be $80, $90. So it is an investment, and it's probably only for those of us who just make bad decisions in finances. So in doing that, I also had an interview because I think I'll be teaching, finally using my PhD. I think I'll be teaching a religious studies class in the university that's nearby. So that is fun and exciting. And otherwise, is there anything else? I don't know. Just the weather's been bad, and so sometimes I lose motivation and mental health stuff as well. But I thought I would make a video today because I was asked to be on someone's podcast to actually talk about Byung-Chul Han. I think I found someone who's excited about Byung-Chul Han as I am, which is just great. And not to say that there aren't a lot of people, I just don't get on much. So sometimes the people have to come to me. And I was asked to talk about Infocracy. I haven't done it yet, so it's just a plan. If it all comes to fruition, I will post links and everything. So this is actually the Han book that I read this year. And I know I had a poll as well that was asking what everyone wanted me to talk about next. And then I just didn't post anything. So I guess that's not the way to go for me. So anyway, so what I need you all to do is help me continue to parse this text in preparation for that discussion with someone on Infocracy. I'll give you all the details, when it actually happens. But last time I think we stopped at the end of chapter 2. Han was talking about the Brave New World. So just a recap. Infocracy is about how we are no longer a society that has access to and seeks knowledge, participation, and like real authentic discourse that is productive. Instead, we are on social media and we are bombarded with all kinds of information, and the temporality is sped up so that we can't linger and reflect and do all the things that we might do, let's say, in a college classroom, where we take a week to talk about a text and we prepare and we maybe write like a short essay. You will in my class. So I just want to motivate you to read, right? That's why I use the discussion boards. Anyway. And you prepare and you take notes, and then you are in class and you have your professor lecture, but then there's also a discussion, maybe a big group discussion, a small group discussion, and then you might write a paper about it. And so there's this extended time. This is why and maybe I'll just make a whole video about it someday. This is why I really don't agree with the anti-intellectual movement that sort of dismisses higher education, formal education, in lieu of what you can gain on YouTube. There's a lot of great information on YouTube, and professors are now starting to kind of curate a audio visual materials list. Like they might, post a YouTube video or something. So we're engaging with that material, but from the perspective of someone who has studied and read in the subject that they're teaching and is, on the path of expertise, if not already an expert. And maybe it's like a journey and do you ever get there? I don't know. Subjective, I guess. But it doesn't take the place, in my opinion, of all of the motivation, of all of the accountability, of all of the curation that you get in formal education. It's just, that's why when I started out, really because I didn't feel like I had any other choice, in an independent study in philosophy, but it's always going to be my preference to receive the benefit of higher education. Just have to figure it out. That's what I think. But do I think it should be less expensive or free? I mean, that is definitely a part of the discussion. I definitely think it should be accessible to everyone. I think it's necessary for everyone. Therefore, it should be accessible. Therefore, we have to do something about the cost. But I probably need to. I think a lot of times if you come up with sort of a position on something, you also have to engage and at least think about how that's going to be realistic. And I can't really do that on the spot. So but that's just, just a hint, a taste of my thoughts, I guess. Anyway, so what I would like you to do is help me parse this text. Continue to give me in the comments any questions that you have about this text, questions that you might have even for Han. My discussion is not with Han himself, although I wish. That would be amazing. Any thoughts that you have on what I say, on my thinking and opinions, anything that you wish that would be clarified, anything you disagree with me concerning, and maybe the most interesting areas of discussion in this text that you would enjoy listening to people kind of muse about. All right, so can I give a summary of this? I think I was starting to, yeah, about the information versus knowledge, the temporality of the digital world. And he has this idea that the digital world and social media is, in some sense, soothing because it focuses on the likes. You can't necessarily dislike something. That was taken off of YouTube, at least, for better or worse. That's another conversation people have different opinions on. And it also threatens democracy because democracy is based on people coming to the public forum and speaking in a rational, logical way, presenting information, and maybe borrowing from the class that I'm taking right now, having some kind of trust in truth, that it is attainable and that it is worth it, instead of sort of a relativistic nihilism. He doesn't necessarily go into that. But we are continuing on with the namesake chapter, Infocracy. And here we go. For the rest of this chapter, I've actually highlighted, the next few pages I've highlighted passages, but from there on, I haven't. So I think we're just gonna read it together and see what we think. And if you are a student in my business ethics class and you are watching this, I am sorry. All of the reasons before are why I've not made any more video lectures. But maybe this is spring break. Happy spring break, everyone. Who knows? Who knows what will happen? Okay. Information is relevant only fleetingly because it lives off of the appeal of surprise. And I can see this because of the unfortunate and problematic agendas of profit and power. Many people, not all people, many people are trying to create a brand. And this is not a judgment. I am doing it. Many people are trying to create a brand. And so they, or even if they're not trying to create a brand, I think it is also human inclination to want to be heard when you speak, want to create a tribe or to create a community. And for that, you need to be in dialogue with people. And maybe part of putting something out on Twitter, in the Twitterverse, is that you hope that you find people that resonate with your thoughts or want to engage with you. Also, what I'm doing on YouTube. And it's just difficult when it falls flat because okay, I'm sort of getting a little mixed up. Oh, this is what I need to edit, but I don't think I'm gonna edit my videos anymore. So I guess what I'm saying is there are agendas that I think are problematic in themselves that have to do with power and profit. Although, can we say that the drive for power and profit is always... Well, I will say that it is always problematic whether, and this is not to mean that we always judge them as being malicious. There you go. It's always problematic when the goal should be the seeking of knowledge and the seeking of community. On the other side that I was introducing about human intent, I don't think that is problematic for the seeking of knowledge. So I guess I have to make a differentiation. Why? Then maybe I need to explain myself even more. Why are the agendas of profit and power problematic for the seeking of knowledge? I would again bring you back to the college classroom. I think that when we are in social media, and maybe in contrast to what Han is saying, because he says there's a smoothness, there's likability, it's subduing, and in a way it is, because if you are scrolling through reels, whether you're on TikTok or Instagram reels, or YouTube has reels now, and you're just scrolling through them very quickly, there is kind of a distracting, subduing, Huxley's soma effect on you. But what I think is missing from Han's discussion is the chaos and the tension and the grittiness of, I mean, it's just the spaces that I hang out in, or like try to observe, the non-academic spaces. There's a lot of ego-driven participation. And when we're talking about misinformation, or we're talking about conspiracies, which I think that discussion needs a lot more nuance concerning, I think conspiracies are so interesting to talk about. And I think there's not enough nuance in that conversation. For instance, some theories that are labeled conspiracy theories turn out to be true. Sometimes they're not actually. I mean, when we're talking about, no, I won't do it. Stay focused, stay focused. Right, so there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of haters, there's a lot of trolling, there's a lot of, I don't know, like for instance, Ellie Anderson often posts on Twitter sort of these comments that she gets on her videos that aren't necessarily about the topic at hand. I don't necessarily get that, thank goodness, for whatever reason, but let's keep that going, talk about the ideas. So sort of, you know, situations like that. There's, you know, Han always says that we need the other, we need the we need the, well, he says negativity, he talks about negativity in the ways of lack and absence, but also in the way of, I think, does he talk about what we dislike? Negativity. Yeah, I think he does. He says that he wants to harken back always to this place where we're coming up against the other, and that's forcing us, compelling us to, I guess, understand ourselves outside of a narcissistic silo or echo chamber, which he says we don't often do because we're sitting alone in isolation with our phones, and our phones, you know, pretty much go wherever we want, you know, the internet sites, I guess, to go. But if you think about, if you contrast that, then the sort of what I would say, what I would argue, the negative energy of social media doesn't always have to be that way. And of course, you can find your sort of beautiful, utopic spaces, which I think those spaces tend to be more academic. So you can contrast that with actual academia. In a classroom, there is order. You know, this kind of aligns with what Han wants and the analytical philosophers. There is order. There are conventions. There are expectations. There is a desire for community, to want to participate in community. Rarely do you have voices, and this might be less rare in graduate school, but I'm talking about undergrad mainly. Rarely do you have voices that try to dominate the conversation because, you know, for what? Unless it's, you know, personal insecurities or whatnot. There's not an agenda of profit or power. The professor doesn't have to, we don't have to advertise, please, students, come in our classes, although that also is being a little bit changed with like the dying of, or the the threat toward the humanities, but again, another video. There's not that, the professor, we are assigned or we choose our classes depending on where we are in the hierarchy. And we have that class, we've prepared for it. We want to prepare an offering because we love so many things just about sharing knowledge. And we get excited about talking about subjects with our students. We get excited about knowing our students and creating a space that feels safe, comfortable, but also intellectually challenging and transformative, so that you leave feeling potentially uplifted, even if it is in a space of sorry, I was checking I'm finally recording on Anchor again. I had to download it, re-download it. Even if you are in this realm of discomfort concerning a lack of certainty for answers for big questions, sometimes classes leave you with more questions than answers, and that is potentially a productive thing. But everyone is better for the experience. Everyone wants to foster a space where people are composed and diplomatic, and that just often happens. So how can we transfer sort of that goodness of the college classroom? And I know not everyone has had great experiences, so you can definitely let me know if you have examples contrary to my sort of blissful vision or experience. School was always my safe place. School was always a place where I felt like I could get away from anything that was manipulating me, anything that was, maybe not healthy or productive. And it was me. I saw that if I put effort forth, there would be good results. And so I think a lot of times when you're trying and you're rewarded, even if it's feedback, like constructive feedback to get better, there's always the path of improvement. I think that instills in an individual a lot of self-worth and confidence. I'm definitely not the queen of self-worth and confidence, but it helped me. Like, it was better than nothing. It brought me from like negative to, maybe a minimum baseline. So these things are great, but that's what social media is lacking. It's lacking order and expectations and conventions. And that could just be because we are in a very nascent stage concerning social media. And that will come. It also could be a part of the postmodern era, which is supposed to be a time that's a little more chaotic, where everything's kind of disrupted in order to examine and in order to create. And meta narratives are suspect. These boundaries and these definitions and anything that is hierarchical or authoritative, anything with structure is suspect. And I think that's, for me personally, I just think that's the natural dialectic between order and chaos. When you have an orderly time, people start to feel a little stifled and critique it and maybe start to question, like, can we do something else? Can life be a different way? And then you get into that mode where, okay, so we're going kind of back to the drawing board and we're reassessing things. And then, after this postmodern era, there will be a time again, probably, if we can look at history, a time of order and stability, etc. Of course, I think Han is very cautionary, and I think one of the questions that I think we can ask is, how can we see Han not just as a conservative, not just as a neo-modern, harking back to a time of the modern age of order and stability. And even before that, if you look at his book, The Disappearance of Rituals, of small communal gatherings where people have specific roles and their expectations, etc. How can we not just look at Han as going looking back, but looking forward. And what is his caution looking forward? I don't necessarily think it's anti-technology, but it is a cautionary tale or message for technology. And I think if we bring the conversation of transhumanism into this and ask with a movement toward transhumanism, what are we gaining? Of course, that's why we're moving to it, because there's gains that human beings want outside of power and profit, just individually, that move us towards Huxley's Brave New World that Han discusses. But what are we, and this is what I feel many people, when we look back in history at technology, feel that we're not asking enough and not looking at enough. What are we losing? With all of the excitement of various technologies, including, the atomic bomb or any sort of technologies that are destructive for the most part, even manipulating the human body or the human experience, even the Industrial Revolution, let's say, and the detriment of pollution. Is there a intense enough emphasis on what we might be losing or what we might be destroying, I guess is another way of saying that. And I think there are a lot of interesting conversations concerning transhumanism. That wasn't a grammatical sentence. Let me try again. There are a lot of interesting conversations on the topic of transhumanism concerning, that's like my favorite word, my favorite transition. I realized when writing papers again as a student, concerning what we need actually to evolve holistically. I think the path of transhumanism opens up a space for a higher quality of living, a more expansive, thinking about like interstellar travel, a more expansive kind of life. But looking at the individual, probably what transhumanism will lead us to is less suffering in the material plane, less sickness, faster, more effective, more painless correctives, and also more effective, I think, absorption of information. If you think about AI, if we are going to be, in some sense, AI, then our brains really might be someday like computers. So, but in all of that benefit, and you think of Huxley's Brave New World, bodies where they were synthesized in a lab. And even if you were, in Huxley's mind, you always needed the workers, but even if you were a beta or a worker or whatever you want to call it down the hierarchy, you weren't sad about it. So in a sense, even mental illness will be sort of manipulated and even erased because we can program people. I mean, Huxley's was more like we have like a vial and we're pouring things in it like a mad scientist, and like a sci-fi, what is it called? Like a B-level movie or something. But, I think that was written when it was written. So it's going to be probably different than that. What are we losing? We're maybe losing, for instance, I'll give you an example. Oh my goodness. I'm just not talking about this book. I am kind of, but so many ideas. I will give you an example of how I chose to sort of reject the help of AI and what I'm gaining from that. So I recently turned off, because I've figured it out because I asked for help. I recently turned off both the autocorrect, the capitalization of words, and the, what was it? Completion, auto completion off of all my tech. It's so amazing. When I misspell a word or my finger can't like hit the right key, it's my mistake. And it's like I'm remembering my old mistakes and I can correct it. And it's so much easier to correct than when I have actually written the correct word or had the correct punctuation and I'm moving on because I don't recheck. Humans don't recheck ourselves when we know we've gotten it right. But the autocorrect like changes it. We all know that. When we're trying to put, I don't know, a philosopher's name or a theorist's name, we're trying to text it and it's an unidentified name. And so our tech AI changes it to like a household product or something. So it's so freeing. It's kind of going back and kicking it old school, but how are human beings going to continue to learn how to spell, to be cautious, to be able to correct and edit and copy edit their own, edit their own works? I mean, I haven't really thought through it too much, but I already feel sort of my gut feeling that I'm enjoying this so much more. It's actually in some ways easier. A lot of religions and spiritualities say that people evolve and transform spiritually, emotionally, mentally, relationally through suffering. Part of me hates that. But if I look back on my own experience, it's just easier to understand other people's health problems when you've had your own chronic health problems. It's easier to be compassionate toward my students when I've sort of lived a life that's similar or parallel. I get how you can feel depression and not want to brush your teeth or get out of bed. Like that's hard. The smallest thing is really hard. And if you have a professor that has experienced that, they might be like, I totally understand that that's your situation. And absolutely, you can't write a paper, you can't read, you can't do anything. So take an extension. I mean, I don't think I think you just have to kind of understand maybe, or read Don Miguel Ruiz's The Four Agreements to really get there as well. Maybe you don't have to, but having the experience just makes it so much more intense to connect to others who have had the experience. That's why I think there need to be more support groups for people who have gone through the same kind of issues or are going through the same kind of issues, because it brings, I guess, comfort to you. Where was I going with that? Oh yeah, what you gain. So if we take away our suffering in the way of technology, are we going to miss it? Are we going to miss being a species as we were? I mean, I am certainly someone who wishes that there were less suffering, and I hope that the next reincarnation will, or evolution of our species will be that. But I'm not sure if I want to do it in the technological way, or I want to do it in the way where you're meditating and, I don't know, like for instance, an example would be studying the Torah day and night, or meditating, or whatever is your spiritual, inclination. You are having you're not dwelling, so you're balancing, let's say, you're balancing. I just never want to, I just really hesitate demonizing anything. So we want to balance the emphasis of the material, and the material is, I want to, play along with the algorithm. I want to get more powerful. I want to get more attention. I want to get more money. I want to get, and again, that's like a lot of people are having trouble going beyond, living paycheck to paycheck. So when I say more money, just the emphasis is not good for any of us. But I don't know what I'm trying to say. Yeah, I think you get it. So I think you get the nuance that I'm like acknowledging there. But when we're focusing so much on the body, whether it's necessary or not, to balance that, not to discard it completely, but to balance that with spiritual desires and intents. I mean, you don't need to do that if a computer does it for you. So that could be a conversation that we could have with Byung Chul. Okay. I didn't even get through one sentence. Okay, so let me read the first part of it again. Information is relevant only fleetingly because it lives off the appeal of surprise. Right? Information lacks temporal stability, and because of its temporal instability, it fragments our perception. I think I actually read that last video. It is not possible to linger on information. This makes the cognitive system restless. We've all probably seen, and I probably mentioned the viral video on, at least I think it's pretty popular, on dopamine and how you can readjust your dopamine by delaying gratification. This makes the cognitive system restless. The compulsion towards acceleration inherent in information means that time-intensive cognitive practices, such as knowledge, experience, and insight, are pushed aside. So if knowledge requires time, if experience requires time, if insight requires time, then those technological spaces that we dwell in more and more are not going to have what requires time, if that makes sense. If it's so fast-paced, if we're posting something and then moving on, if we're going from website to website without, because when you are reading a book, I was talking to someone about this. Oh, I think it was my hairstylist. Okay, so when you are reading a book, and especially if you're, but even if you're not, but if you're highlighting, if you're marking notes, probably your mind will go off on another line of thinking that was inspired by the amazing quote you just read, kind of like what I do in my videos, which I don't know. But you put down your book and you think about that, or you have to look up a word and you go back to the quote, or it sends you down a little bit of a rabbit hole of, they mentioned, they were making a reference or a connection between politics and or criticism of politics and a particular Greek god. I don't know that Greek god, so I have to look it up. But then I go back to the quote, right? So you're spending 15 minutes on a few lines, but that's really productive, right? Do we feel the same kind of transformation and benefit when we're spending 3 hours on Twitter or Instagram or whatever? I don't feel inspired. I just feel drained. And I feel that I didn't do the things that I really wanted to and valued, in that day. Not to say that technology is bad, right? I mean, I use technology. I mean, that's never where I think the conversation needs to go. I think what Han is doing and what people who are critiquing technology, maybe even Heidegger, they're not trying to, even if a small part of them wants to, harken back to a time of the past. That's unrealistic. We can never go back to the past exactly how it was, nor was the past, great for everyone, right? So that's why the whole "Make America Great Again" doesn't resonate. Put the accent on that word correctly. Doesn't resonate with everyone because it in a lot of ways. Well, I think when we're talking about America, a lot of ways, it wasn't great for everyone. So what is that greatness that you want to? So it's not, I don't think it's always problematic that you see something in the past that you miss, or that you could be nostalgic for, or you would like to experience because it was before your lifetime. But I think we need to mark that out very specifically, and that's what I think Han does. The technology is really helpful because it's allowing people to have a voice. I think that was one of the main elements of excitement for many people, thinking about the possibility of public forums on the internet, was that we could have a voice. Maybe there could be more opportunities for us to do that in real life. And I think that's great. But it does help you find people. I mean, it helps people who are, you know, in different countries find love. It helps people who are in intellectual alignment find each other to create projects and to create projects. We'll just say that. It helps people with their differences that are marginalized and not acknowledged in society find information about them. So they know that, oh, well, there's nothing wrong with me. That's what it is. So there are really great things. And I use, my meditation app. I think I kind of figured out how to meditate through the great guided meditations on like Timer. I mainly use this app called Timer, but there's a lot of them, right? Or Gaia.com, has meditations and talks. And then there's podcasts. And then, maybe it's better to learn a language without technology. But for those of us who are learning languages through technology, there's such difference when you're learning a language that has a lot of resources on the internet versus a language that you're learning that doesn't have so many resources. You have to be creative, and maybe that's a good thing, but it's also helpful when I can turn on, France 24 in the morning and hopefully like absorb the beautiful French language. So eventually that will help me in my lessons, which I haven't also been doing. So these past 2 weeks have been months. I've been productive and I'm grateful for them, but they've also been different. I haven't been able to do my usual things. Anyway, it's a personal caveat that no one cares about. Yeah. So what are we gaining? I think the question is, what are we gaining with whatever? And also, what are we losing? So we have to think about all of that and proceed, I think, a bit more cautiously. The generally short-term nature, and this is also why I think we can connect Han with Heidegger, because Heidegger's book was called Being and Time, and Han talks a lot about ontology, like what are we becoming, who are we, what could we be, and time. The generally short-term nature of the information society is not conducive to democracy. So that's kind of his other point. Discourse is a time-intensive practice. Rationality is also a time-intensive practice. And I think he would probably say that essential to democracy are discourse and rationality. Fake news, he brings this up, is more interesting than fact. So this is how we're pushing fact aside, and we are enjoying fake news for various reasons. Some people are. And I think that the analytic philosophers can really help us here talk about what happens, our motivations and the effects, and what is happening with fact and truth. I think their main, my lips are chapped. So I think the main criticism, for instance, let's say, logical positivists like Ayer had on metaphysics was that they claimed that the metaphysicians, or people in that, branch of philosophy, they're really talking, I mean, this is kind of harsh. This is the words, yeah. Nonsense. It's meaningless. Or they're talking about something that is, to be a little bit nicer, poetic and lyric, and maybe they would even say spiritual, in these different realms. But they think and they act as if they're talking about things that can be verified or falsified. They're talking about what can be true or can't be true or fact, when in fact, they are not in that language game, but they're borrowing from the language game and confusing everyone. And so by calling it fake news, that's a perfect little coined phrase. It's fake. So it's something that's not, it's not necessarily, I mean, what is it to be fake? Now I want to look that word up. See the etymology. It's not something that is in the realm of true or false. It's fake, it's entertainment, it's whatever it is. But news is supposed to be something that has fact and that has truth and that has, you're reporting on something, you're trying to be objective. So it's this juxtaposition of two terms that are not alike. And that has a particular, that's called something. What is that called? I don't know. Tell me in the comments what it's like on the tip of my tongue. Okay, anyway. So I think that that's what's happening, and that's why there's so much chaos around the political on the internet. And it's because we're trying to talk about something, beliefs, opinions, in the way that we would talk about something else that actually we could actually test empirically, that we could verify. We're talking about things as if we could verify them, but we can't. So we really need to use different rhetoric and have different expectations about the conversations we might be having in some realms on the internet, because they're not conversations. They might be more religious in nature. They might be more fantastical in nature. They might be more, borrowing from the logical positivists, which I don't think many people would agree with now, because, I mean, are you really going to say that about Heidegger? I don't know. Metaphysical, whatever you want to say, there are different realms outside of a realm where we can say that, okay, is this a fact or is it not? Well, we can verify it. We can falsify it. We can test it through empirical evidence. So I think the thing that we can gain from the logical positivists, the analytical philosophers, let's just widen that umbrella a little bit, is their preoccupation with defining very meticulously the different categories, organizing so that we know where we're coming from. We understand what is at stake with this conversation, what we can do with this conversation, so we understand our limits. Because I think trying to push a conversation that is in a different realm than the logical space, just to use, I think that might be Wittgenstein. I mean, of course, he says in the Tracticus, be silent, but I don't think human beings really want to be silent about everything that's just not in the logical space. So if it's outside, so pushing what is not in the logical space to the logical space, it just can't be done. It's kind of like when certain religions try to prove themselves and try to be a science. Not to say that you can't have elements of spirituality and try to, see what you can do in a scientific lab, thinking about, the experiments of, now that we can record brain waves, looking at the brain waves of someone who's meditating versus someone who's washing the dishes non-meditatively or something like that, looking at brain waves, or testing, I don't know, I think there was some study on taking water, and my water looks like this because it has vitamins in it, and I probably need to drink it and let it, instead of just letting it set out. Taking water and having, Tibetan monks chant and seeing, and then freezing the water and looking at the crystals or something like that. It's sounds scientific enough, I guess. Maybe someone who's really in science can say if that's scientific, but it sounds like they're applying the scientific method. That's kind of helpful to say that, oh, meditation has scientific backing. But I think it can turn into this like harmful evangelical cult if you're attaching your faith to something that can't really be verified. I think it gets problematic for people, and it can even be harmful. But that's what I think is what's happening on the internet in some places right now. And that's why it feels so, it can feel a bit traumatic and not necessarily transformative in a positive way. Okay, I think I'm actually going to stop there. So this is not working. We didn't get very far. But anyway, I think I'm going to stop there. What questions do you have? What thoughts do you have? What am I trying to say? What am I trying to bring up? Was anything that I said interesting that you want to know more about? And you just want me to go more quickly through this book. Anyway, I'm just glad to be back on here. And I really thank all of you who just, waited around for my next video. I think I'll be better from now on, especially because it's spring break and I don't know. The dialectic, right? Like you go through a time of instability and then stability comes. So maybe that's it. Okay, thank you, everyone. And yes, I obviously did cut my hair. I don't know if anyone notices or cares, but I just want to recognize that I did. All right. See you later, everyone. Bye.